We begin this hour with escalating frustration up on Capitol Hill. More lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are now demanding the Trump administration release the full video of that very controversial follow-up strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean.
We got to get any videos that do not in any way compromise mission integrity down there. Just get the stuff out there.
I believe the American people deserve to see. And even if you would argue, well, there are sources and methods, I'm not sure I accept that argument, but sure as hell, at least members of Congress ought to see.
If there's a way to release the video, which I have not seen, but if there's a way to release that does not compromise our intelligence gathering, I would urge him to do it.
It was a very unsatisfying briefing. I asked Secretary Hegseth, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, would he let every member of Congress see the unedited videos of the September 2nd strike? His answer, we have to study it. Well, in my view, they've studied it long enough.
President Trump, for his part, doesn't appear concerned by the congressional exasperation. Watch what he told a Pennsylvania crowd last night at an event that was supposed to be focused on his economic agenda.
But they don't go after our ships. You know why? Because that same missile that knocks the crap out of them, that with the drug dealers from Venezuela and others.
All right, so let's bring in CNN's national security correspondent Kylie Atwood. So Kylie, these strikes, as we know, they have been going on for a while. A lot of questions were raised, though, when we found out about this second strike, right, back in September. But then we knew that some survivors had actually been released, right? And now you're learning more about what has happened to survivors on other boats that were struck.
Yeah, that's right, Pam. So there have been more than 20 drug boats that have been struck over the course of the last few months. In total, there have been 5 survivors after the initial strike, and that is on 3 separate incidents that we know of. So as you said, it's this first drug boat strike that has been most controversial, and that's because there were those 2 survivors that, according to briefings that the Congress has now received from the Pentagon, were believed to be holding on to pieces of the boat after the first strike that were floating. So they believed that there was still cocaine in that boat, and that is why the second strike happened. But of course, there's been a lot of controversy over that second strike and the legality of it. But there are those 2 other instances in October where there were also survivors, but they were treated very differently. So on October 16th, there was an incident where there was another strike. There were 2 survivors, and the U.S. actually took in those survivors, and then they released them to the countries that they were from. That was Ecuador and Colombia. Now, according to the New York Times, there was some back and forth between the State Department and the Pentagon during this period of time, with the Pentagon suggesting that maybe they send these survivors to a mega prison in El Salvador. State Department lawyers, according to the New York Times, were pretty stunned by that proposal, but they were eventually released to both Ecuador and Colombia. And then there's a third instance, and that is later in October. This was on the Pacific Ocean, and there was 1 survivor after 14 were initially killed in the initial strike. And the U.S. went to the Mexican Navy, told them that there was 1 survivor. The Mexican Navy carried out a search and rescue mission. They weren't able to find that survivor. That person is presumed dead. So if you look at all of these instances, the way that the U.S., the way that the Pentagon dealt with how to deal with these survivors is very different. We heard over the weekend from the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, saying that there are different circumstances in each of these. There wasn't actually different protocol that was followed, but there are still many questions. You heard from lawmakers yesterday after they were briefed by top members of President Trump's national security team, still having questions, particularly about this September 2nd strike. And one of the things that they want are the legal opinions at the time.
So just to follow up, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but so in that first strike, some of the justification from DOD has been, well, there was still cocaine in the boat and they could have posed an ongoing threat, right? In the case where the 2 survivors were captured and then released, do we know if there was cocaine in the boat still on that one?
So
or any
what
drugs?
A U.S. official told my colleague Haley Britsky about this, who writes at length about these 3 incidents, is that they were the only 2 survivors of that instance, which means that they were not perceived as still posing posing a threat because the submersible that was carrying the drugs had been fully downed in the strike. So because they didn't pose a threat, that is the reason that they were then taken in by the U.S. and then released to the countries where they were from.
The first one, though, part of the boat remained, or, you know, and they were trying to
thought
flip it
they were
back
still
over.
holding on to
Right.
those drugs.
Okay.
There's questions about, that rationale, but that's what they told lawmakers last week.
All right, Kylie Atwood, thank you so much. Excellent reporting.
Also new this morning, the Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers, is prepared to end his panel's investigation into that very controversial follow-up strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. The committee aide tells CNN, and I'm quoting now, the video and classified briefings from the Pentagon were sufficient to convince him this was a legal action. For more analysis, I want to bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath. She's a former U.S. Marine combat fighter pilot, and we should note she's also running for the U.S. Senate in Kentucky as a Democrat. Thanks so much, Colonel, for joining us. I know there's a lot going on right now. As someone who has risked her life, in your particular case, fighting for this country, why are you so concerned by everything we're learning right now about this so-called follow-up strike in the Caribbean?
I think it's really concerning because, first of all, if the Pentagon had no problems releasing the first video, and they didn't, they tweeted about it. They're very proud of these videos. And then, when there's a controversy with the second boat strike, and there is, these guys, as you just were mentioning, were clinging to the boat. And to justify and say, well, there's cocaine there and we have to go and destroy the boat when, we have laws of war. Right now, we don't even know if we're at war because Congress hasn't authorized anything. But, our military, when you see people who are shipwrecked, you can't just execute them. And so there is controversy here. And if the Pentagon says they're the most transparent Pentagon, which is what they've said, they ought to release this second video. It doesn't pass the smell test when you're like, hey, there's secret stuff in the second video, but not the first. Come on, we all know this.
What do you say to perhaps the lay person who's watching this unfold and say, well, I mean, they were, and you can have questions about whether the first strike is legal, right? And a lot of Democrats have come out and said they believe that they're not legal, right? But what do you say to the American out there who's like, well, if they're trying to strike and kill the bad guys, why not just finish the mission?
Yeah,
and again, I know that there's a legal aspect, but I think that it's a political messaging aspect too.
Well, I certainly hear that a lot because, in Kentucky, we have a real problem with opioid crisis.
Yeah.
People want to go after, and I want to go after drug dealers. But it doesn't pass the smell test when the president and these Republicans then turn around and pardon, one of the biggest narco terrorists on the planet, in this ex-president of Honduras, who not only trafficked 300 tons of cocaine, tons, not pounds, but also was sentenced to 45 years in prison. So you can't say, okay, I really want to do this, I really want to strike these boats and go after these guys, but at the same time turn around and pardon the actual drug kingpins. I mean, that doesn't pass the smell test for Americans or for Kentuckians. And also, if you really care about this issue, you really care about the people who are hurt by addiction and drugs, why would you then turn around and cut programs for treatment and prevention? And that's exactly what these Republicans did last summer when they passed this big bill. So it doesn't jive, it doesn't connect.
We should note also Senate Republican leader John Thune, a member of the Gang of Eight, he told reporters yesterday that he hasn't even seen the video of the second strike. I mean, you have worked on Capitol Hill and the Pentagon. What do you think members of Congress and the American people need to see to be assured that follow-up attack was legal, as DOD is claiming?
Well, it's about accountability. And first of all, we're putting our military in a hugely bad spot because Congress is not doing their job. They're not authorizing the use of force. That is what their job is to do. And if you want to take out all of this and you want to find out is this legal or not, Congress needs to authorize the use of force. But this second boat strike, I mean, it doesn't make sense to release the first boat strikes and then turn around and say, well, there's something secret in the second one.
They've been reviewing it for a while. How long do you have to study it?
And we know why they're not releasing it. Because they know what happened was wrong.
fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.